This is the latest edition of Front Up, and I'm Whitey Willauer, and I've got a very interesting guest today, Peter Boyton, that he will be talking about several of his things that he does, but he's particularly interested in wildflowers on Nantucket. And Peter, tell me about wildflowers on Nantucket. Where did they come from? Have they always been here?
Well, that's a pretty broad question, Whitey. One of the interesting aspects of wildflowers on Nantucket is what is a native wildflower and what is a non-native wildflower. And Peter Dunwitty, who worked for the Audubon Society on the island probably 15 years ago, was sort of our mentor when we got involved in our interest. My wife and I got involved with our interest in wildflowers. And his definition for native wildflower, or a native plant, is a plant that existed on this island just as the European exploration came to the United States. And then anything that came in after that is not a native plant, but it's a transplant or that kind of thing. And that is an interesting concept. That's his scientific concept or definition, but I say to him, you know, if a bird came over here in 1802 and dropped a seed on Cotu and plants started to grow, now is that a native plant or not a native plant? My interest in the island's wildflowers started back in the early 90s, when my wife, who was very artistic, wanted to start painting some of the natural plants and wildflowers here on the island. So I started to take photographs of them for her so she could get the details. We would look at them in the field, and then we'd bring home these pictures, and she would have these details in her room when she was painting. And as I was taking these photographs, this unbelievable world of wildflowers opened up in front of my eyes. The beauty of each one, the special structure, the places where they grow. Most of my photography is macro photography, so you get in really close and you're studying the structure. And it really was kind of a mind-blowing experience. I say it was a religious experience because it is such a beautiful part of our world. And as we did that and went around the island and found some of the more interesting wildflowers, we just realized how special some of the plants on this island are. You could almost consider Nantucket a little bit like a Galapagos because it's been out in the middle of the ocean, 30 miles off the coast of Cape Cod, and it has its own environment, it has its own soils, it has its own salt problems and wind problems and that kind of thing. So some of the plants that have been growing here, native, and the ones that have been here for quite a while, can very often develop their own characteristics. One of the things we notice is that they don't grow as tall or as big as some of the plants in the books that you would read about on the mainland. And also there could be color variations because what's in the soil. But as I was taking pictures of this and this world was unfolding in front of our eyes, finding out the fact that there's a native cactus on this island just amazed me. I'm saying, what is this island in the northeast part of the country in the middle of the ocean? How does that have a native cactus? And then there are 5 carnivorous plants on this island. They are not unique to this island. They do grow other places, but I had no idea that there were plants like the pitcher plant and a family of sundews and this kind of thing that grow on the island. And they grow in these special places that are very acidic, like the bogs and some of the ponds that are in the middle of the moors.
Do you catalog all of this?
No, I don't catalog all of this. Peter Dunwitty did a comprehensive study about probably 20 to 25 years ago of the plants on the island. He and Bruce Sorey, I believe his name was. And they have a scientific booklet, presentation that lists as many plants as they could find. There are about 1,500 of them.
1,500 separate species?
Yeah. Yes.
Flowering plants?
Well, and shrubs, and basically anything that grows on the island and Tuckernuck and Muskeget.
Are there differences between Tuckernuck, Muskeget, and Nantucket?
That I can't answer for sure, but I would say that if we think Nantucket is windblown and gets a lot of salt spray, I'm sure Tuckernuck and Muskega get even more, and so the vegetation out there would be considerably lower and more salt tolerant and influenced by the salt air.
Now, do we have endangered species of plants here?
We do. We have some plants that are very special concern and considered endangered. One of the things we learned about that was that you have the region of New England, and in the region of New England there are plants that are endangered. So we fall within New England, the zone of New England, and or the state of Massachusetts. And so if you have a plant that's endangered, say in the state of Massachusetts, it may not be endangered out here. For example, the blazing star, which grows late in August and September. We have tons of it, but there are a lot of other places that do not have it. One of the special plants we have is an aster, Aster concolor, and that is or concolor, and that is a plant, an aster, that this is the only place in New England that they know it grows. And the conservation people and Mariah Mitchell have literally hired people to study this plant, and there's a couple of colonies on the island, and they've hired people to study all summer to figure out how many insects come crawling into a square meter, and they've wrapped plants in protective cloth so they couldn't be cross-pollinated and all this kind of thing. It's fascinating study done for Mariah Mitchell. Another plant that has popped up recently is something called the lion's paw. It was believed to be extinct in New England. And then when the Nantucket Golf Club did a ecological survey, they found this plant out on their property. So this
How did they know about?
Well, they did a survey by a.
Oh, they had a professional.
Yes,
come in,
that was part of their permit. That they had to come in and assess what what was on their land. So they found this plant, which caused a lot of excitement. And then since then, we have found the plant in many other places. Out in the grasslands beyond Bartlett, there's quite a few of them actually growing. So that was kind of an exciting thing.
Now, is there an attempt to tell people not to pick these plants, or what kind of guidance is? I remember we used to be told, don't pick these plants.
Well, there was this poster put out by, I think, the Nantucket Garden Club about some of the special plants that we had.
Yeah.
The wood lily and the blazing star and the swamp rose mallow and those kinds of things. The Turk's cap lily. I don't think there really is an attempt or any organized attempt to make people aware that they should not pick these plants. As a matter of fact, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, there was this beautiful Turk's cap lily, which is really a special plant and is not very numerous here on the island, growing right alongside the Pulpus bike path out towards Fulling Mill Brook, I think, or Fulling Mill. And it was just gorgeous. And I was taking pictures of it, and then one day I came back and it was no longer there. Now that could have either been eaten by a deer, but it looked to me like somebody cut it off, and it probably ended up as a centerpiece on a table, which is unfortunate. I think more and more with the people coming here to the island as an effort in conservation and that kind of thing, people are becoming more and more aware of the native plant. A lot of people confuse native plants with what I would call indigenous plants, which are things like bayberry and the Rosa rugosa that grows all over the place, and those kind of plants, which are not really native plants, but they're plants that really grow well in this kind of environment. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Now, do you travel all the time around and look for these? What's your procedures?
Well, back in the early 90s, when this world started to unfold in front of our eyes, I did spend a lot of time riding around this island and trying to find some of the more special plants. It was over a period of 2 or 3 or 4 summers, growing seasons, where I really was intensely finding these plants. And again, our mentor and kind of guidance person was Peter Dunwitty, and he would kind of direct us to some of the more unique places to see some of the more unique plants that grow here on the island, like some of these sundews, and there's something called a white fringed orchid, and they grow in these remote, very acidic environments. One of the places that they do grow, and there's some very interesting plants, is the old Sconset Dump. And we've been out there to look at what's going on out there. And there's some special plants out there.
Now, do you transplant any of these plants?
No, I don't. I have propagated some of these plants. There are two plants in particular that I became very interested in because Peter pointed them out. One is a butterfly weed, not a butterfly bush, but a butterfly weed, which is a bright orange plant that grows about 3 feet high, and it has umbral florets as part of its flower. And that grows in certain places around the island, but Peter would characterize this plant as extremely rare in the wild on Nantucket. And then there was another plant that he told me about, which is called a cardinal flower, which essentially only grew in one spot on the island, and that was out where the former Grossman house used to be located. There's some wetlands out there, and this plant likes wet feet. So I located both of these plants and took pictures of them and shared them with my family and shared them with my friends and that kind of thing. And then I asked Peter if he thought that propagating these plants would be something that I could do. And thinking about the cardinal flower, if the cardinal flower grows only in one spot, and say there was some kind of episode where it would kill the cardinal flower, or a fire, or someone would go in there with a machinery or a shovel or something like this and dig it up, then we would lose this particular flower to the island. It would no longer exist. So he said, yeah, go ahead, collect the seeds. He said, but if you're going to do this, don't call up the New England Wildflower Society and say, could I have some cardinal flower seeds, or could I have some butterfly weed seeds? Collect the seeds that are here on the island and grow the plants from the seeds that are here on the island. So that's what I've done. And in the particular case of the cardinal flower, it was a very interesting time collecting the seed from the cardinal flower and trying to propagate my first plant. But I have propagated it. I have it growing around my house. I have sold some to friends. I have given them away. So it is established in other places around the island. So if this one stand out there in the Pulpus area got destroyed, we don't lose that plant. The butterfly weed is a plant that grows in the sort of out in the dry lands, out sort of beyond Bartlett in that heathland sandplain area. And it's extremely rare in the wild. So what I did was I went out and I found one. I collected a seed pod late in the summer, in the fall when it dries out. And I came back, and the next year I put some of these seeds in the ground and I started to grow them. And now I have a group of butterfly weed plants around my house that furnish me with the seeds that I use for propagating further plants. And I'm actually have put some in packages, and we're selling a few wildflower plant seeds as well. At one point, after I started propagating them, I thought, well, gee, I could get into the business and propagate these plants like the blue flag iris, and there's a slender-leaved iris, and then there are Joe Pye weed, and there's swamp rose mallow, and these kind of plants, and they all are very hardy here on the island. And so I started doing that, and about 4 to 5 years ago, Whitey, I had 4,000 to 5,000 potted plants around my house. So here this interest started, and it just got totally out of control, and I realized that I was not set up to be in the nursery business. Craig Benny was out at Surfing Hydrangea, was selling my plants, and I think he's made a lot of people, we have made a lot of people aware of some of the beauty of the natural wildflowers that grow.
That's wonderful.
One aside, or one very pertinent comment is, I think, I've been sitting here listening to people talk about fertilizing the island, And the beauty of these plants is they don't need fertilizer.
I see.
They love Nantucket soil. They grow in Nantucket wind. They don't need all the soil amendments or the fertilizer that some of the special plants that people are bringing in from off island need.
That's very.
So you know they're happy to grow here without all that stuff.
Well, Peter, I've enjoyed talking to you or talking with you, and we really appreciate you being here, and we probably ought to have you back in the near future to hear more about what you're doing. So thank you very much for coming, and we appreciate it.
Thank you, Woody. I enjoyed it.
It seems like 100 years since I reached out to dry